Welcome back, Sebastian here. Some time for my review for the 2025 Dutch Grand Prix. Quite a dramatic Grand Prix, a lot of action, not a ton of overtaking, but I think pretty consequential race in terms of the Drivers' Championship, and a shock result in terms of driver on the podium as well. So let's get started. So Piastri started on pole after a very strong qualifying session, where on a weekend where Norris had really dominated the practice sessions. The fact that Piastri was able to get on pole, obviously very, very small margin, about a hundredth of a second. Still a bit of a blow to Norris, given that this was a track he basically dominated Piastri at in the last couple years. Great start by Max Verstappen. He gets alongside Norris and basically goes around him around the outside of turn one, and then promptly has a bit of a scary moment on the entry of turn three, has a bit of a slide, but manages to save the slide and control the car and basically stay in P2. Started on the soft tire as well, whereas most of the other drivers around him started on the medium, so that probably helped his launch a bit as well. Lap 5, Piastri pulling away from Verstappen, not a big surprise there. And Hadjar train is starting to form a little bit, as he doesn't quite have the pace of the Ferraris or the Mercedes directly behind him, but that was kind of to be expected. That being said, the Zandvoort track, very narrow, very difficult to overtake around here. But lap 8, Lando Norris makes it look easy. He overtakes Verstappen for P2 at turn 1, just goes right around the outside of him and makes it look relatively easy. And again, if you're a Verstappen fan, probably having a bit of PTSD from last year where it was almost the exact same scenario. Norris starts right ahead of Verstappen. Verstappen takes the lead on the first lap, and then Norris basically repasses him fairly easily within the first 10 to 20 laps. Stroll is the first driver to pit, and he pits for hard tires. Verstappen, lap 14, now 6 seconds behind Norris, really just highlighting the really dominant pace of the McLarens. And honestly, his pace was not that much better than Hadjar's or the Mercedes or the Ferraris behind us. He was kind of starting to fall a little bit backwards towards that group of drivers. Lap 15 starting to rain a little bit, but this was very, very light rain, anywhere close to intermediate tires. But again, if it rained enough, it might cause a little bit of problems, and it would cause problems. There would be some problems later. I don't think they were exactly caused by the rain, but we'll get there eventually. And I wrote no change of position since the start, other than Norris Verstappen. Speaking of the start, I think drivers who had a really good start, Albon up 5 positions, up to P10 from P15 on the grid, I believe. Alonso, not a great start from him. He started P10, but dropped down to P12 off the line. So those were kind of the two big movers, I would say, in the midfield for the opening lap. But really, that opening stint, not a lot happened, just the Norris Verstappen overtake. Lap 20, Tsunoda undercut by both Aston Martin, so not great there. Lap 23, Leclerc pits, attempting to undercut Hadjar, and that is when his teammate decides that's not going to happen. So not quite, but basically Lewis Hamilton, a really rare big mistake for him. He crashes, basically has a bit of a loose moment with the rear on the exit of turn 3, goes a little way too wide, goes off track, very dirty up there, and there's very little grip, and he basically just loses control of the car, goes into the wall, and that brings out the first safety car for today's race, which basically effectively just killed Leclerc's strategy, as of course he had pitted to undercut, and now the driver that he was attempting to get in front of now has a free pit stop, as well as the driver who is directly behind him, George Russell. So Leclerc is now behind Russell, so basically instead of gaining almost not necessarily guaranteed, but very good chance of gaining a position there, he now loses one and all of that. And Tsunoda also is now 15th, but two drivers in front of him had not yet pitted, so it was about a net 13th as well. It's not a great execution there for Tsunoda, a little bit unlucky for him. Lap 23, the safety car comes in, and we have an incident between Lawson and Sainz, both drivers running in pretty strong points paying positions, and basically there was contact between the two of them on the exit of turn 1. This was obviously a very contentious moment in the race, as Sainz was given a 10-second penalty for this incident, and I really felt like it was a racing incident. I honestly thought it was about a 55-45, 55 Lawson, 45 Sainz, but unfortunately the way that the regulations or the guidelines are written for driver basically conduct in wheel-to-wheel racing, this was Lawson's corner, and he kind of took advantage of that a little bit too much, in that he basically put himself in a vulnerable position that basically where he basically allowed contact to happen, and that basically negatively affected both of their races. Sainz, of course, went on a pretty long rant on the radio and later in the media pen about this. Not a ton of very nice things to say about Lawson. Maybe in a week's time he'll feel a bit better about it, but obviously Sainz has had a very frustrating season, very unopportunistic in terms of the fact that he hasn't been getting a whole lot of points, and feels like every time the car is performing well, there's a really good opportunity, he doesn't get the points, but his teammate does. And unfortunately, that was a trend that continued later in that would also continue this race. So lap 31, virtual safety car comes out to pick up some damage, I believe, from that collision. And I think that following lap, right after the virtual safety car ends, we have another pretty contentious overtake as well. But to be honest, I thought it was very, very impressive by Leclerc. Leclerc basically barges his way past Russell at the turn 11-12 chicane. Pretty impressive move there. I think from some onboard shots, it looks like he overtakes off track, but I do believe, like, when you look from the front facing camera, it looks like his right rear tire is still within the white line. So I do think, at points he has at least part of one tire on the racetrack and not basically on the curb, on the gravel. But nonetheless, very impressive move. Does have some negative ramifications for Russell, as he basically would pick up a bit of damage that would cost him quite a bit of lap time for the rest of the race. But in the end, the stewards basically investigated this. They couldn't come to a decision, so they just said, we're going to investigate this after the race, and then they decided not to give a penalty for that. So a bit unclear there. I do think that was the right decision. By the way, I do think it was best not to give a penalty there, unlike the Sainz one, where again, I felt like the stewards kind of came to the wrong conclusion, and that one should also have not been a penalty. And then I guess this is where, 10-second penalty for Sainz. That's where that was announced, and he obviously had his radio meltdown. Antonelli at this point in the race, very, very strong pace and showing a really strong pace on his tires. And in fact, so much so that Mercedes basically asked Russell to let him pass. Of course, at this point, Russell does already have a bit of damage from the incident with Leclerc. But yeah, so Antonelli basically moves up into P6. Let's see, Sector 1, Alonso overtakes Hulkenberg as well at turn 12 for P16. So again, on fresh tires, making up some moves there. Lap 52, I believe that is. Antonelli pits, comes out in 8th. Leclerc pits the following lap. Antonelli, a lot of really, really strong pace here. So Leclerc basically covering him off. And unfortunately, this would end very badly for Leclerc, as Antonelli basically just gets the corner wrong, goes a little bit too wide on that kind of exit of turn 3, and basically spins Leclerc around. He goes into the barriers, and his race is done. So we have a double Ferrari DNF. Very unfortunate race for both of them, of course. Driver error for one part side of the garage for Hamilton, and then a bit of an unfortunate incident for Leclerc. Basically gets taken out by Antonelli, and Antonelli would get a 10-second time penalty for that. I definitely agree with that decision. And again, the safety car comes out a second time. So this, in the race, basically most drivers have basically only pitted when the safety cars come out. So I think this really benefited Hadjar, as it basically meant that he didn't have to worry about getting undercut by cars that were potentially faster than him in race pace. I think it also benefited Piastri as well, because it basically meant that Norris could never try to do any kind of alternative strategy. And also because they were 1 and 2 on track, it meant that Norris lost a little bit of time in the pit stop, basically because he had to wait for Piastri's stop to finish. But luckily for him, he was always kind of they were always far enough ahead of Verstappen that Verstappen was never able to get in between the two of them. But basically some pretty wild strategies there, despite the fact that a lot of drivers basically did most of their pit stops during the 2 safety cars that we had. And then to make matters worse for Antonelli, he picked up a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So not a great weekend for him. He's had a very, very rough stretch of races in Europe. I believe he's only scored 1 point in the European leg of the season, which is just not good enough. And of course, technically next week out in Italy is the last race of the season in Europe. And that's, of course, his home Grand Prix. So hopefully he can end this leg of the season on a bit of a high note, what's been a pretty dreadful leg of the season. So, of course, yeah. Well, actually, we'll go back. We'll get to that eventually. So now Sonoda basically overtakes Bortolero for P12 at turn 12, and there was quite a mixture of strategies at this point in the race. I think a couple drivers, Gasly, Bortolero, basically opted to not pit under the second safety car to try to hold on to track position. So Gasly was running 8th. I think Bortolero was running 10th. Both of them, I believe, won hard tires, and unfortunately, for them, this was a strategy that really did not work out, and both of them really got basically taken out. They were passed pretty easily by most of the rest of the grid after that second safety car, so they were just getting passed left, right, and center. Stroll overtakes Alonso for P10 as well. Behrman overtakes Gasly for P8. Stroll then overtakes Gasly for P8 before our next very pivotal moment in the race, and that was, of course, Lando's engine giving up. It turns out it was an oil leak. So again, unclear at this point if it's a chassis issue or if it's purely an engine issue. But that is Lando Norris out of the Grand Prix, and again, I think this has potential to be a really decisive turning point in the 2025 F1 Championship. Is this going to be, Norris's Malaysia 2016, where it's a really big turning point in the championship, or does Norris fight back and he overturns this now 34-point deficit, I believe it is, or actually 31 point deficit, and become champion at the end of the season. So obviously very unfortunate for Norris, very unlucky, so close to the end of the Grand Prix, but at least I guess the one bright side for him at least is that he was in P2, so he was never going to win the race anyway. So instead of a P16, like a 16-point deficit, is now about a 30-point deficit. And of course, if it was the other way around, if he was leading the Grand Prix and this happened, then I think it would sting quite a bit more than it did. But yeah, safety car comes out again, and again, the Team Lando pit wall is basically distraught. Zach Brown doesn't look happy. Will Joseph has his head in his hands. And again, I know there's been quite a few accusations of the McLaren team kind of favoring Norris over Piastri, and I do think that there's a little bit of validity for that, and there's obviously some reasons for that. But yeah, they definitely did not look very happy at that point in the Grand Prix. So safety car eventually ends. Not a whole lot after that, but there were some little bit of shuffling of position here and there. But it meant that at the end of your Grand Prix, your top three are Oscar Piastri. He wins his first time winning the Dutch Grand Prix. Max Verstappen P2. Not a big surprise. I thought he had a very, very good weekend. Red Bull finally got their car working in the right window, and he was pretty clearly third best driver, at least just in terms of pure performance, pretty much from qualifying onwards. Never really looked challenged for that final spot on the podium. Of course, with Lando's DNF, that moved up to a P2. And then your shock podium finisher is Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bulls. Finishes on the podium in his rookie season. Great accomplishment, and all around a very, very excellent weekend for the young French driver. Started P4. Again, a little bit of luck to get that podium with Lando's DNF helping there, but still excellent job in what's definitely not, I would say, probably, on the balance of the season, definitely, maybe fifth or sixth best car this weekend. Obviously hard to say. Potentially second or third best car, maybe it's a little bit better than the Red Bull, but still, nonetheless, don't want to take anything away from him. Excellent job done by him. So taking a look at the rest of your results for the 2025 Dutch Grand Prix, Russell P4, Albon P5, Behrman P6, that's his highest Grand Prix finish in F1. 7th Stroll from P20 on the grid, pretty good job from him. He seems to just somehow get points even when he's not really supposed to. 8th Alonso, 9th Tsunoda, finally gets his first point since Imola. That's way too long in the Red Bull, and hopefully maybe he can take this momentum and move it up. But that being said, it required 5 drivers who started in the points paying positions to basically either DNF or have big things happen to them. So again, I think for some of the drivers, especially in the lower points, it's not necessarily a massive reflection of a great weekend, but I think sometimes these kinds of races happen. 10th Ocon, 11th Colapinto, very close to the points for him, but again does beat Gasly again this weekend, but a little bit of luck there with that, with the strategies. 12th Lawson, 13th Sainz, 14th Hulkenberg, 15th Bortoleto, 16th Antonelli. Of course, with that 10-second penalty, that dropped him well out of the points. I think he finished P6 on the road. 17th Gasly, and then your 3 DNFs are Norris, Leclerc, and Hamilton. So finishing up with looking at our championship standings. We'll see if my computer can handle this. Yes, so championship standings, Oscar Piastri extends his lead over Lando Norris. Not a big surprise there. In terms of other position changes, big moments, Antonelli and Albon are now tied on 64 points apiece. So a great job by Albon there. Been very, very opportunistic this season. Other position changes, Hadjar and Stroll both move up. So Hadjar is now 11th, tied with Hulkenberg on 37 points. Stroll is in 11th on, what is that? 32, and then Alonso moves down 1 to 30th, and then Ocon moves down, I think, 2 spots down to 28th. Behrman also moves up quite a few positions. He was previously 19th in the championship. He is now 16th on 16 points, and that moves Sainz, Bortoletto, and Tsunoda all down, despite the fact that Tsunoda scored. In the Constructors' Championship, I believe. Let's see, let me think about this. I believe McLaren extend their lead in the Constructors' Championship there, despite the fact they only had one car finishing the race. And again, they're going to probably wrap up the Constructors' title in, with 6-7 races to go in all likelihood, just because of the other 3 teams, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull. They've basically been taking points off each other all season. Now, in terms of changes for the Constructors, Racing Bulls move up to 7th on 60 points, and Sauber moves down to 8th on 51. So looking at that battle for 5th in the Constructors, looks like it's going to be a pretty tight, intense battle for the rest of the season, with Williams sitting on 80, Aston on 62, Racing Bulls on 60, and then Sauber on 51. So there you go. That's my review of the 2025 Dutch Grand Prix. Pretty exciting Grand Prix. A lot of drama, not a ton of on-track action, but I think just the fact that it was so, the track's so narrow, it's so hard to overtake here. I think it actually meant that drivers had to take really, really big risks, which is what we saw, with the Antonelli, Leclerc, with Lawson, Sainz, and with Leclerc and Russell as